What's up, y'all? I'm making this video today because I want to show y'all how to... Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started on mounting up this scope. And I'm going to show y'all what we're going to use. We got a Vortex Diamondback Tactical 4-16 by 44. It's got a set of Butler Creek scope caps on it already. And I got a throw lever here. Got a set of Warren Tactical MSR flat top rings. These are made for ARs or a flat top receiver, that kind of thing. So good set of rings. I got my Fix-It Sticks kit here. To install these rings and the scope, you're going to need a T15 bit, your torque wrench, and your 1/2-inch socket. And to finish everything off, I like to use sleeve retainer as my thread locker. So let's go ahead and get started. I almost forgot, I like to use a magnetic cup. You get them at Harbor Freight pretty cheap. I use that for my hardware while I got it apart, putting things together. So let's go ahead and get started on the rifle, and let's go ahead and get this scope mounted. Okay, so first things first, we're going to take our rings out of the package. We're going to put one here at the farthest forward point on our upper receiver. And we're just going to hand tighten these real lightly. Okay. Now, if you leave it loose, you'll notice when you put it in your slot on your rail, see how much room we have front to back? It's important you push forward and hold it forward when you go and snug that nut up. We're going to do the same thing on the back. We're going to come back here, and we're going to go ahead and push it forward, and we'll go ahead and tighten up this nut just snug. Then we're going to come back in here with our torque wrench, and we're going to torque these 1/2-inch nuts to 65 inch-pounds. So we're going to come in here, and we're going to go to 65. That's 55. We'll give it one more shot. Okay, here we go. That one's 65. We'll do the same thing here on the back. Okay, my rings are where I want them. Now we can go ahead and begin removing the ring caps. So you're going to take your T15 bit, and we're just going to go ahead and spin these screws out. And I'm sure some of you will have the question of, why are you using a set of rings instead of just a cantilever mount like most do on an AR? Well, I will tell you why. Yes, I've used them in the past. Yes, they work. But call me crazy, call me whatever you want, but I just don't really prefer them, because when mounting a scope, you want to have your rings as far apart as they can be with having your eye relief and everything where it needs to be for you. But you also want to place them rings as far apart as possible. Now, by switching over to a set of rings on this rifle compared to a cantilever mount, I have the rings a good 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches wider. And the reason for that is it promotes strength. It will be much more rugged and rigid for your scope. See, they're nice and far apart. They're not real tight here. That'll help stabilize your scope, as well as keep it from having any kind of problems with flexing, that kind of thing. I mean, this is a 5.56, so obviously we don't have to worry about that, but having your rings wider is the best. So that's very important, and that's why I decided to make this video, so I could share this information with y'all. So what we're gonna do now that we got the scope up here. Okay, nice fit. These worn rings don't really need to be lapped, but they can be. I have another video up that shows me lapping some scope rings. If you'd like, check out my other videos, and I have a video on that. But for this guy, we're just going to go ahead and take the ring caps, and we're just going to throw them back up here. Good, nice fit. And we'll just take a little bit of sleeve retainer, and we will go ahead and put it on the screws. Nothing too crazy. So you just take your sleeve retainer like this, and you'll just put a tiny little bit on there. You don't need a whole lot. It's kind of thick, and that's why I use it, because it's a little bit thicker than say blue Loctite. And I don't really like using Loctite, because if you ever had to take it back apart, sometimes you can get to the point where the Loctite just glues them threads in so good that you can't get it back apart. So I like using the sleeve retainer because it is a removable thread locker, and it also allows you just ease of disassembly if you need it. But it also will not allow these screws to loosen up. This stuff is actually used to hold sleeves in engine blocks. And that was actually where I came up with the idea of using it, because when I was building engines and I was using this stuff, I ran into a problem on a gun where I needed to take up a little bit of slack in a receiver for a barrel. And I needed something that was going to take up a little bit of the slack, because the hole happened to be a little bit big, and it wasn't drilled straight to begin with. So it had to be straightened out, and it had to be opened up. And as crazy as it sounds, the sleeve retainer here will actually take up to 7 thousandths clearance. So I naturally used that to help remedy the problem, and it worked real good, and I've had 0 issues with that rifle ever since. Okay, we're just going to come in here. And it's most important, too, that you go ahead and tighten down your screws evenly. It's very important to do that. You don't want to over-torque them. You don't want to make them uneven. You don't want to have the ring cap to one side or anything. You want to just make sure you get them in there nice and even. That's very important. This is also why we use torque wrenches. So you just put a little bit of sleeve retainer on your screws. You get them started. We're not going to go crazy. We'll just get them in a little bit. And what you want to do is you want to start with your front ring. Okay, we have these nice and loose, but you want to start with your front ring, and I'll tell you why. So, when you go and tighten down your rings, if some of you have seen this, a 20 MOA base, that kind of thing, it is canted this way towards the front. It is lower in the front than it is in the rear. This is just 0. It's no MOA right now, okay? It's just 0 flat straight. Now, you want to tighten down your front ring cap so that, if anything, it will cause the front of your scope to be slightly lower, so that will give you a little bit of MOA. But then again, you know, there's really nothing there. It's just my method. It's how I do it. And you want to tighten these down evenly, like I was saying. Now what you're going to do is get them close and then pull up on this. Now, the opposite side is just a hair tighter. So we will go ahead and do that until it's nice and even. Tighten up this side until it's nice and even. Now you want to tighten these down just until they touch. You don't want to crank them down or anything because we haven't leveled the reticle yet. That's important. We also haven't set the eye relief. So we'll go ahead and tighten down this cap, and then I will show y'all about how to level it and your eye relief. What you ideally want is you want to have a nice clean sight picture through your scope, obviously, but it's important that when you mount your scope that you get the eye relief right so you get a nice, clean, clear picture. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up to where I like it, and then I'll come back in and show y'all how you go ahead and level the reticle. Okay, so I have got the scope mounted up, loose in the rings, so that I have it where I want it. Another important thing is you want to mount the scope as far forward as possible. Now, what I mean by that is you want to mount this scope as far forward in the rings as you can for adjustment, as far as, like, you know, how wide you can keep them. You want them at the widest point, but you also want to keep this scope as far forward as you can. Couple reasons for that. One, you want to take full advantage of that eye relief. You want to keep that scope as far from your eye as you can, but also keeping a clear sight picture. So that's very important. That will help you with, one, keeping the scope from hitting you when you shoot it, if it's a high recoiling rifle, or it will also help you, you know, it'll help you shoot better as well, because you have a better sight picture and it will be more consistent, and you don't want to be right up on the thing. You want to get a nice, clean, full view. So to level it, we're going to go ahead and take my Fix-It Sticks scope jack, and we're going to go ahead and use that tool to level the reticle. Really cool tool. All you do is just loosen up the nut, and it mounts to your Picatinny rail, kind of like a scope ring, which is kind of cool. And you'll just leave it just a hair loose so that you can bring this guy up. Now, I'm going to move the scope off like that. That's obviously far from level. And this is pretty cool. So you're going to take your driver here, and watch what happens when I push this thing. Perfectly square. Now once you do that, you'll come around here, hold some tension on it, and just tighten it finger tight. That'll hold that there nice and tight for you. And we can go ahead and, while the scope jack is keeping it straight while we tighten our rings just a hair, I'm sure some of you out there have noticed that when you mount a scope, sometimes you run into, okay, I got it nice and straight, and I go to tighten the rings, oh, it moved left or right. So when you tighten one side or the other, it may make the scope shift. So the scope jack eliminates that by holding this nice and flat. So what we're going to do, we're just going to snug these down just a hair. Nothing crazy. Okay, we got them touching. Now we can come back in and we can go ahead and torque the ring caps. So we're going to take our torque wrench attachment. We're going to come in here and we're going to go ahead and torque our ring caps. Give them just a little bit. You don't want to torque one without the other. What I do is I usually come in and I will just spin it until I get 15 inch-pounds, just to keep them nice and even and straight. And I'll go over them a couple times to keep it even. See, if I turn it and I get just a little bit out of it and it doesn't really torque, I'll just go around it until they all feel the same. And as you torque these, you will notice when you get to your next screw, sometimes it will be a little bit loose. Now, Another important tip also is you want to torque these in a cross pattern, so like an X. We're going to torque these to 20 inch-pounds. Warren recommends no more than 25. I like to keep it a little light at 20. So I'll go right between the 15 and 25 mark. And you just want to make sure that you're always going across on these screws. Always going across in either a X pattern or just diagonally across. Okay, so we're here. We'll jump over here to the back left. Give it a little torque. Okay. Okay. Just nice and easy. Just give it a little bit. We'll come back here and do the same thing. Go right to 20. We'll come across. 20. And 20. Come back here and we'll do this one again. Right there at 20. Right there at 20. And just keep going in a cross pattern. And make sure you torque them all the same. Some of you may ask, why is a torque wrench so important? Well, you don't want to over torque your ring caps, because if you do, that can cause a couple problems. Well, for one, if you have some cheap, undesirable rings, they probably will not be as good a fit as these Warren rings, and that would require you to lap them to get the fit up to a better spec. But what a lot of people run into when you go and do that is it will actually dent the tube of the scope. And you don't want that, especially on a very expensive optic. You know, that's the last thing you want. So keep it in mind. Something important to think about. Always use a torque wrench. It's very important. I'm just going to go over these one more time. I like to go over them about 3 times. Come here to the back one. Okay. Now that we're all done, we can go ahead and loosen up the scope jack. Pull it out of there, and there we go. We are ready to go. All done. Thank y'all so much for watching the video. Really appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. And if you have a question, drop me a comment and I will get back to you as quick as I can. Appreciate y'all watching the videos. Have a great one.